The mining colony of Kestron 4 had always been a place of hard work and silence. Its dusty plains and endless pits of black stone were far from Earth's green fields, but the settlers had learned to survive. They dug deep into the crust, harvesting valuable minerals to send back to the Alliance. But the deeper they dug, the more attention they attracted, and not from friends. The Varash came in the night. No warning, no talks, no chance to run. They dropped from the sky in dark, sharp-edged ships, their soldiers tall and armored in plates of black and silver. The Vorash were known across the outer rim for their strength, their hunting skills, and one whispered fact that made human children shiver. They ate those they conquered. Whether the rumors were truth or not, it didn't matter. The fear was enough. The people of Kestron 4 surrendered without a fight. From that day, they were ordered to pay tribute, ore, supplies, weapons, and sometimes people. Captain Elias Ward had heard the stories while stationed on a nearby outpost. When he received a distress call from Kestron 4, he led his small squad straight into the fight, thinking they could push the Vorash back. He was wrong. The battle didn't last an hour. He woke with his wrists bound in metal cuffs, his weapons gone, and the alien soldiers hauling him toward a massive Vorash ship. Around him, other prisoners, miners, traders, a few soldiers, were being herded in lines, like cattle. The corridors of the Vorash ship were high and narrow, lit by red light that made everything seem dangerous. The air smelled faintly of metal and something sharper, like the scent before a lightning strike. The Vorash guards spoke in their guttural language, pushing the captives forward. Elias didn't ask where they were going. He could guess. They brought him into a grand hall unlike anything he'd seen. The walls were carved with symbols that looked more like scars than art, and massive banners of deep crimson hung from the ceiling. At the far end was a throne, if you could call it that. It wasn't ornate. It was made of dark, bone-like material, shaped as if grown rather than built. And there she was, the Vorash Queen. She was tall, easily a head above her soldiers, with skin that caught the light in shades of deep bronze. Her eyes were sharp and golden, glowing faintly in the dim hall. She wore armor that was both regal and functional, and when she stood, there was no mistaking the power in her stance. She looked like a ruler who could fight her own battles. One of the Vorash generals stepped forward and addressed her in their tongue. The words were too fast for Elias to understand, but the gesture was clear. The general pointed to him, then to the long stone table in the center of the room. Elias's jaw tightened. So this was it. The human offering. The lunch. The queen's eyes moved over him like a predator studying prey. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. She simply watched him as if measuring his worth, or deciding how best to kill him. The general reached for Elias, shoving him toward the table. A dozen Vorash soldiers stood ready, some holding long, hooked blades. Elias stood straight. If this was his last moment, he wouldn't go crawling. When he finally met her gaze, something flickered in her eyes. Not hunger, not amusement, curiosity. She lifted a hand, and the room went silent. Her voice was deep, steady, and carried authority that made even her generals pause. Stop. The general froze, confusion flashing across his scarred face. My queen, he rumbled in common tongue, his accent heavy. The tribute is yours. He is strong, fresh from battle. I see that, the queen replied, her eyes never leaving Elias. She stepped down from the throne, each movement deliberate. And yet, he does not fear me? Elias's lips twitched in the faintest smile. Maybe I just don't know enough to be afraid. A ripple of surprise went through the court. The general growled. He mocks you. But the queen tilted her head. No. He challenges me. She circled him slowly, like a great beast deciding whether to strike. Human, do you know who I am? I've heard the stories, Elias said evenly. Vorash Queen, ruler of a people feared across the rim, and supposedly, his gaze sharpened, someone who eats her enemies. A murmur of amusement ran through some of the younger warriors, but the older ones stayed tense. The queen stopped in front of him, close enough for him to see the faint lines of old scars on her jaw. Supposedly, she echoed, almost as if testing the word. Then, without warning, she turned to her court. This human, she announced, her voice ringing across the hall, is mine, not as prey, not as prisoner. She let the silence hang for a moment. He is my bondmate. The hall erupted. Several generals stepped forward, protesting loudly in their own language. The words were harsh and sharp, carrying tones of outrage. One warrior even spat on the floor in disgust. Elias blinked. You're... what now? The queen ignored him for the moment, addressing her court with steel in her voice. By ancient right, a chosen bondmate is under my protection. Any who harm him will answer to me. The protests continued, but none dared to approach her. Finally, she turned back to Elias. You will come with me. 2 guards moved to seize him, but not roughly this time. They guided him through a side corridor away from the angry voices of the court. They reached a set of doors far larger than the rest. The queen spoke a command, and the doors opened to reveal a chamber unlike the dark halls outside. It was lit by warm golden light from crystalline panels in the ceiling. The air smelled faintly of something floral, and the walls were decorated with flowing patterns instead of jagged scars. Your quarters, she said simply. Elias stared at her. So let me get this straight. 1 minute I'm about to be executed. The next you're declaring me your husband? Her golden eyes narrowed slightly. Bondmate. It is not the same as your human marriage, but it is binding. No one in my kingdom may kill you now. He crossed his arms. Why? You are different, she said, studying him. When prey is brought before me, they tremble. They beg. You stood as if ready to face me. That is unusual, even among my warriors. So I'm your pet project? A curiosity? Her lips curved in what might have been a smile, or just the Vorash version of one. You may call it that, or you may call it survival. Elias glanced around the luxurious room. And if I refuse? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something quieter but heavier. Then you will walk back into that hall, and you will not walk out again. He held her gaze for a long moment. There was no bluff in her tone. Fine, he said finally. But if I'm stuck here, I'm not going to be just some silent trophy. Good, she said, turning toward the door. Then perhaps you will survive longer than the last. The last? Elias asked sharply. But she was already gone, the doors sliding shut behind her. Elias stood in the middle of the room trying to piece together what had just happened. He was alive, for now, but alive in the hands of a people who saw. Humans as prey, a people who might see him as a threat simply for existing here, and a queen who, for reasons he couldn't fully trust, had just made him hers. Somewhere in the distance, he could still hear the faint roar of the Vorash court's anger. He had the feeling things were only going to get more dangerous from here. Elias didn't sleep that first night. The room was quiet, but too quiet. The air was warm and still, the lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. He sat on the edge of the bed, an oddly elegant structure of black stone and silver furs, listening for footsteps outside. Every sound made him tense. He wasn't used to being unarmed. His hands itched for the weight of a rifle or even a knife. But here, surrounded by alien warriors who could probably snap him in half, a weapon would only get him killed faster. When the doors finally slid open in the morning, it wasn't a guard who entered. It was her, the queen. She wore no armor this time. Instead, she had on a flowing dark robe with gold patterns that shimmered as she moved. It made her seem less like a warlord and more like, well, royalty. "You are awake," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Hard to sleep," Elias replied, standing. "Because you fear I will eat you?" Her tone was flat, but he thought he caught a glint of amusement in her eyes. "Because I'm in an enemy palace," he said, "and I don't know why I'm still alive." She stepped into the room, the doors sealing behind her. "You live because I said you would live. That is all you need to know." "That's not enough," Elias said sharply. "Your people hate me. Your generals were ready to put me on that table. I'm guessing saving me wasn't just about curiosity." The queen's golden gaze stayed on him for a long moment before she turned and gestured for him to follow. "Come." They walked through high corridors lit by cold white light. Varash guards stood at every corner, their armor gleaming. None spoke to him, but their eyes followed him like hawks tracking prey. The queen led him into a chamber filled with strange hanging banners, each one painted with sharp, almost claw-like symbols. In the center of the room was a long oval table surrounded by tall-backed chairs. Alien artifacts, blades, armor, carved stone tablets lined the walls. "This," she said, "is the Hall of Records. The history of the Vorash is kept here." Elias glanced around. "You brought me here for a history lesson?" "Understanding is the first step to survival," she said. "You humans hear stories. You think we are mindless beasts who kill for sport. Some of those stories are true. Many are not." She approached one of the banners, running her clawed fingers over the painted fabric. "Long ago, the Vorash were hunters without kings or queens. We fought each other constantly. The strongest ruled for a time, until someone stronger took their place. Then came the first bond." "The first bond?" She nodded. "Two leaders from rival clans, deadly enemies, joined together, not for love, but for survival. Their union ended the blood war and united the clans into one people. From then on, choosing a bondmate was not just personal, it was political." Elias started to see where this was going. "So when you declared me your bondmate, you became more than a man," she said. "You became a symbol. My choice tells my people that I see strength in unexpected places, that I am not afraid to bind myself to someone different." "Or it tells them you've lost your mind," Elias muttered. Her lips curved slightly. "Yes, some think that too." He shook his head. "You've put a target on my back. You already had one the moment you set foot in my hall," she said. "At least now, killing you will cost them their lives." Before Elias could reply, the doors to the chamber opened and 3 Vorash entered. They wore lighter armor than the palace guards, and their expressions were sharp with disapproval. One of them, a tall warrior with silver tattoos on his jaw, stepped forward. "My queen," he said in common tongue, "the council demands an audience. They will not accept a human as your bondmate without trials." The queen's golden eyes narrowed. "The council does not command me." "They command tradition," the warrior replied, "and the people watch closely." Elias frowned. "Trials?" The queen glanced at him. "Tests, challenges, ways to prove you are worthy of the title I gave you." Elias could already guess the kind of challenges they meant, and they wouldn't be spelling tests. The warrior smirked at him. "Perhaps the human will survive one day. Perhaps." Elias met his gaze and didn't look away. "Guess we'll find out." The queen dismissed the warriors with a gesture, but when they were gone, she turned back to Elias with something like warning in her eyes. "They will not make it easy for you," she said. "The trials are designed to break the weak, and in their eyes, you are already weak." I've been underestimated before, Elias said. It's an advantage. You are clever, she admitted, but cleverness alone will not save you. She began walking toward the door, and Elias followed. She took him next to a large balcony overlooking the Varash capital. Elias stopped at the sight. The city stretched out below in vast layers of stone and metal, built on terraces that rose like steps toward the sky. Tall spires shaped like jagged teeth pierced the clouds. Airships, sleek and dark, moved between them. It's huge, Elias said quietly. It is the heart of my people, the queen said, and it will tear you apart if you show weakness. Elias glanced at her. You seem almost certain I'm going to fail. I have chosen you, she said, but choice does not guarantee survival. If you die in the trials, the bond is broken. My enemies will gain ground, and the Vorash will return to seeing humans as prey. Elias understood the weight in her tone. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the future between their peoples. So, he said, what exactly do I have to do? Her answer came that afternoon. Elias was taken to a massive arena built into the side of a cliff. Rows of Vorash filled the seats, their voices a low rumble of anticipation. In the center, the ground was marked with strange patterns and scattered with weapons, spears, short blades, and something that looked disturbingly like a weighted chain. This is the first trial, the queen said from her place on a high platform. You must last until the sun sets without falling. That's it? Elias asked. A gate opened at the far end of the arena. A Vorash warrior stepped out, towering over Elias by at least a foot, muscles like coiled steel under his armor. His face was painted in streaks of black and red, and in his hands was a long, double-bladed staff. Elias exhaled slowly. Of course. The gong sounded. The warrior came at him fast. Elias dodged the first swing, feeling the wind of the blade pass inches from his head. He didn't have the size or strength to meet the Vorash head-on, so he kept moving, circling, forcing the bigger man to turn. He spotted a short spear in the dirt and grabbed it on the run, using it to block a downward strike. The impact jolted his arms, but he stayed on his feet. The Vorash roared in frustration, swinging again. Elias ducked low, swept his leg out, and managed to knock the warrior slightly off balance. Not enough to drop him, but enough to earn a murmur from the crowd. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Sweat dripped into Elias's eyes. His muscles burned. Every instinct told him to attack. But he knew that wasn't the goal. The goal was to survive. When the sun finally began to sink behind the cliffs, the gong sounded again. The trial was over. Elias was still standing. The queen rose from her platform, and for the first time since he met her, she smiled. Not mockery, but approval. You lasted, she said. Barely, Elias muttered, his chest heaving. Then we'll see the next trial, she said. As the crowd's rumble faded, Elias realized something. This was only the beginning, and the queen's decision to save him had just placed him in the deadliest game of his life. The morning after the first trial, Elias woke to the sound of heavy footsteps outside his quarters. The door slid open, and two Vorash guards stepped inside. One carried a bundle of dark fabric, the other a strange curved weapon. Dress, one of them said in common tongue, his voice flat. The next trial begins soon. Elias took the bundle and unwrapped it. It was light armor, dark plates over flexible cloth, with silver markings along the chest. The weapon was a short, single-edged blade with a grip shaped for a human hand. It fit him perfectly. When he stepped into the corridor, the queen was waiting. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. You survived yesterday, she said. But the second trial is not about survival alone. It is about loyalty. Elias raised an eyebrow. Loyalty? To who? To me? She said simply, and to the Vorash people, though many will not see you as one of us. They walked together through the palace, down a long ramp that led underground. The air grew cooler, the walls lined with carved stone depicting battles and hunts. Elias noticed that in some of the carvings 2 figures stood side by side, one male, one female, fighting together against entire armies. Bond mates, the queen said, following his gaze. Not all survived their trials. Those who did became legends. Elias gave a small smile. No pressure, then. They entered a chamber with a wide, circular pool of water at its center. Around it stood several Vorash elders, their armor polished, their eyes sharp with judgment. One of them stepped forward. "This is the Pool of Fangs," he said. "Beneath the surface are 3 sacred banners. You must retrieve them and return them to the queen. But you will not be alone." The water rippled. Something large moved beneath the surface. Elias frowned. "Let me guess. There's a catch." "There are 6 banners," the elder said, ignoring him. 3 for you. 3 for your opponent." A second gate opened, and a Vorash warrior stepped out. Elias recognized him, the same silver-tattooed fighter who had mocked him in the Hall of Records. His name was Korash, and the smirk on his face said he was looking forward to this. The queen's voice was calm, but Elias could feel the warning beneath it. "The banners are the goal, but the trial ends if one of you cannot continue." Korash's smirk widened. The gong sounded, and both men dove into the water. The cold hit Elias instantly. Visibility was poor, the water thick and cloudy. He swam downward, searching for the banners. Movement flashed to his right, and he saw Korash diving deeper, his powerful kicks propelling him like a torpedo. Elias spotted the first banner, a strip of dark cloth tied to a stone pillar. He swam toward it, untied it, and pushed off the pillar, heading upward for air. Something moved beneath him. A massive shadow slid through the water, its long tail sweeping back and forth. Rows of teeth flashed briefly before vanishing again, so that's why they call it the Pool of Fangs. Elias broke the surface, gasping for air, and tossed the first banner onto the pool's edge where the queen stood. Without wasting time, he dove again. This time, the shadow was closer. He reached the second banner, but as he untied it, a sudden force slammed into his side. Korash! The Vorash grabbed the banner from Elias's hands and shoved him away. Elias tumbled backward, fighting the water to steady himself. He kicked hard, circling around Korash just as the shadow moved again. He didn't have to be faster than the predator, just faster than the other guy. The shadow struck. A huge, scaled creature lunged from below, jaws snapping. Korash barely twisted aside, the creature's teeth scraping his armor. The banner drifted from his grip, and Elias snatched it, swimming hard for the surface. When he emerged again, the crowd around the pool roared. The queen's eyes locked on his as he threw the second banner to her feet. Korash surfaced moments later, glaring. "You got lucky, human." "Yeah," Elias said, diving again. "I'm good at that." The final banner was deeper than the others. Elias swam down until his chest burned, the water pressing against his ears. He saw it tied to the base of a carved statue, a Vorash warrior holding a spear, and circling it. The predator. It was. Larger than he thought, with scales like black stone and eyes that glowed faintly blue. Its body moved with slow, deliberate grace, like it knew exactly who was in its territory. Elias stayed still, letting the current drift him closer. When the creature's head turned away, he darted forward, untying the banner as fast as his frozen fingers would allow. The creature turned back. Elias didn't think. He kicked upward hard, the water exploding behind him as the predator lunged. Its teeth closed where his leg had been a second earlier. He broke the surface, banner in hand, and tossed it to the queen before collapsing onto the stone floor, gasping for breath. Korash emerged moments later, empty-handed. His glare at Elias was pure venom. The elder stepped forward. The human has passed the second trial. The queen's expression was unreadable, but Elias saw the slightest nod of approval. You show persistence, she said. And you do. Not let fear control you. Elias pushed himself to his feet, still breathing hard. Fear's still there, he said. I just don't let it steer the ship. The queen's lips curved faintly. Good. That night, back in his quarters, Elias was met by an unexpected visitor. It was the young Vorash warrior he'd seen in the stands during the first trial, a slender figure with sharp eyes and no armor. The warrior bowed slightly. My name is Veshra, they said in careful common tongue. You saved my brother yesterday. Elias frowned. Your brother? The young fighter in the arena, Veshra said. When he fell, you could have ended the trial quickly, but you pulled him back to his feet. That is not the Vorash way. Elias shrugged. Where I come from, we don't leave someone behind if we can help it. Veshra studied him for a long moment. Some will hate you more for that. Others will see strength in it. Before Elias could reply, Veshra glanced toward the door. Be careful, human. There are those in the court who will not wait for the trials to decide your fate. They left without another word. The warning proved true, sooner than expected. The third trial was announced the next morning. Elias was led to a wide training ground within the palace walls. The queen stood on a raised platform, surrounded by her generals. This trial, she said, is not about strength or endurance. It is about choice. Elias glanced around. There were 3 Vorash prisoners kneeling in the dirt, their hands bound. Each looked battered, their armor dented and scorched. These warriors, the queen said, were caught spying for the rebels who wished to remove me from the throne. You must decide, execute them here, or release them. Elias stared at her. You're asking me to decide whether they live or die? I am asking you to show the court what kind of ruler's bondmate you are, she said. They will judge you for it, whatever your choice. The crowd was silent, watching. Elias looked at the prisoners. One met his eyes with pure hatred. Another looked away, shame written in every movement. The third looked young, no older than 19 in human years and terrified. Elias turned back to the queen. If I let them go, they'll come after you again. Perhaps, she said. If I kill them, it shows I'm just like the worst of your people. Perhaps, she repeated. Elias exhaled slowly. I'm not here to play executioner. He turned to the crowd. Let them live. If they come after us again, then we'll deal with them. But killing them now doesn't make us stronger. The murmur that followed was divided, some voices approving, others angry. The queen's gaze was unreadable. Interesting choice, she said. That night, word reached him that one of the generals had been overheard speaking with Korash, plotting to end the humans' trials before the next one began. The warning from Veshra echoed in his mind, and, for the first time, Elias realized that surviving the trials might be the easy part. The palace was usually a place of cold order, but that night it buzzed with whispers and tension. The usual quiet halls echoed with hurried footsteps, hurried voices speaking in low, sharp tones. Elias sensed something dangerous stirring beneath the surface, something that had nothing to do with trials or tradition. He had barely finished his evening meal when the doors to his chamber slid open without warning. 3 armored Vorash soldiers stood in the doorway, their faces grim. One held a sealed message scroll, stamped with the queen's insignia. From the queen, the leader said. She requests your presence immediately. Elias swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if this was good news or bad, but he knew only one way to find out. He found the queen waiting in the great hall, the heart of the palace. Unlike before, the hall was filled with tension. Guards stood at attention, their weapons drawn. The usual loyalists were nervous, whispering in small groups. And the queen herself looked fierce, her golden eyes sharper than ever. "Elias," she said without greeting. "They are coming." "Who?" Elias asked, stepping closer. "The council," she said. "They have declared me unfit to rule. They plan to overthrow me, and they will not stop until I am dead or exiled." Elias felt a cold wave in his stomach. "How did you find out?" "A spy within my court warned me hours ago," she said. "The rebels will attack tonight, during the ceremony of unity. It is when the people gather to renew their loyalty to the throne." Elias's mind raced. "What do you want me to do?" "Fight," she said simply. "Not just for me, but for all who stand with us, and for the bond we share." As the sun set, the palace transformed. Torches flared to life along the walls, casting long shadows. The Vorash people gathered in the open courtyard for the ceremony of unity. Many wore the traditional red and black armor of loyalty, but some faces were grim, eyes filled with fear or hatred. Elias stood beside the queen on the raised platform, her armor gleaming in the firelight. The moment felt heavy, as if the air itself held its breath. Suddenly, chaos erupted. From the crowd, armed rebels surged forward, shouting war cries and raising weapons. They had smuggled blades and explosives among the civilians. The loyal guards reacted instantly, but the rebels were fierce and prepared. Elias drew the short blade given to him during the trials. He wasn't as strong as the Vorash warriors around him, but he had speed and a mind trained for quick decisions. He moved through the fighting crowd, blocking strikes and helping loyalists. His first opponent was a tall rebel swinging a heavy axe. Elias ducked the blow, slashing at the attacker's leg. The man fell, grunting in pain, and Elias pushed forward. Beside him, the queen fought with the strength and skill Elias had only seen in legends. Her blade moved like lightning, cutting down attackers with ruthless efficiency. Yet even she was not safe. A rebel soldier lunged at her from the side. Elias saw it just in time and threw himself between them, blocking the strike with his blade. The force sent him staggering, but the queen nodded once, recognition of his courage. The fighting grew fiercer as the rebels pressed their attack. Explosions shattered pillars and sent dust into the air. Amid the chaos, Elias spotted Veshra, the young warrior who had warned him earlier, fighting off two attackers at once. He shouted her name and charged to her aid. Together, they took down the rebels around them, moving like a well-practiced team despite their brief acquaintance. "This way," Veshra shouted. "The queen is hurt." Elias followed her through winding corridors, the sound of battle echoing behind them. When they reached the queen's chamber, he found her leaning against the wall, a deep cut across her side, bleeding steadily. "Stay close," she ordered, voice tight with pain. They fought their way back to the courtyard, Elias supporting the queen as best he could. The loyalists had regrouped and pushed the rebels toward the palace gates. But the leader of the rebels was still free, a massive Vorash general with a cruel smile and a scarred face. He roared a challenge. Elias stepped forward, blade ready. The general laughed. "You, the human? You think you can stop me?" Elias didn't answer. He charged. Their blades clashed in a storm of sparks and steel. The general's strength was overwhelming, but Elias's speed and cleverness kept him alive. He dodged a crushing blow and slashed at the general's side. The fight was brutal and long, but Elias landed a final strike that forced the general back. The tide of battle turned. With the general defeated, the rebels scattered, retreating into the night. The palace was saved, for now. The queen looked at Elias with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, respect, perhaps even trust. "You fought well," she said quietly. I fought to survive, Elias replied, and to protect what matters. She reached out and took his hand. You are no longer just my bondmate. You are my partner. The court would still resist the human's place at her side, but after this night, many could not deny his strength and loyalty. Later, as the palace settled, Elias stood on the balcony with the queen. The city stretched out beneath them, calm again under the moon. We've won this battle, she said. But the war for the throne is far from over. Elias nodded. Then we'll face it together. She smiled softly. Yes, together. The morning after the failed coup, the palace was heavy with tension and exhaustion. Guards patrolled every corner, eyes sharp and alert. The Vorash people spoke in hushed tones, their usual pride mixed with fear. Their queen had survived an attack on her throne, but the threat lingered like a shadow. Elias woke early, the weight of the past night pressing on his mind. His body ached in places he hadn't known could hurt. But more than the pain was the strange sense of belonging. He felt standing beside the queen. He was no longer a prisoner or a curiosity. He was part of something larger, something that could change everything. He found the queen in the war room, surrounded by maps and advisors. Her wound was healing but still bandaged. When she saw Elias, her golden eyes softened. Good. You're awake, she said. I'm always ready, Elias replied with a small smile. She gestured to the table. We must prepare. The rebels will return, stronger this time. We cannot afford more mistakes. Elias studied the maps. The rebel forces had spread across several nearby territories, gathering allies and resources. The next battle would decide the future of the Vorash people and the fragile peace between them and the humans. Over the next days, Elias trained with the Queen's warriors, learning their tactics and culture. The Vorash respected his determination and his refusal to back down, even when he was outmatched. Slowly, the barriers between them began to break. One evening, Veshra approached him quietly. There is a ceremony, she said, for bondmates who survive the trials and the dangers beyond. It is not just tradition, it is a promise to the people. Elias looked at the queen, who nodded. That is our next step, she said. The ceremony was held in the great hall under the watchful eyes of the Vorash people. The air was filled with a mix of anticipation and doubt. Some whispered that a human could never truly be one of them. But Elias stood tall, wearing the dark armor of the trials and holding a blade that symbolized his bond with the queen. The queen began the ritual, speaking in the Vorash tongue, a language harsh and beautiful. She placed a hand over Elias's heart, then over her own. In you, I see strength, she said. In you, I find trust. Together, we bind our lives for the future of our people. The crowd was silent, then erupted into cheers and applause. After the ceremony, Elias and the queen walked to the palace balcony. The city stretched beneath them, a vast, living thing of stone and light. We have faced death together, Elias said. But what comes next? She smiled. Now we build a future, one where humans and Vorash can live without fear. Elias took her hand, feeling the warmth and power in her grip. I am your husband, he said softly. And you are mine, she replied. In the days that followed, Elias helped the queen rebuild trust among the Vorash clans. His courage and wisdom showed them a new way, a way beyond fear and hatred. The human who had been served up as lunch was now a leader, a partner, and a symbol of hope. Together they faced the stars, not as enemies, but as allies.